The localization of anime games has come an extremely long way over the past 20 years. Today, pretty much every home console and handheld game based on an anime comes out in the West, barring a few exceptions. And it's not a stretch to say that much like the anime industry itself, Japanese developers working with anime license have begun tailoring games to Western fans. But back in the 6th and 7th generation of consoles, anime fans would be lucky to get a few games that didn't have the words Dragon Ball, Naruto, or Yu-Gi-Oh! On the cover. So many games for the PS2, GameCube, Wii, DS, and PSP remained Japan exclusive. And unsurprisingly, the One Piece franchise fell victim to this in the mid-2000s. And today, I'm going to be giving you a look into the GameCube games that never left Japan. From TV animation, One Piece Treasure Battle was the first game released on the GameCube, and it's honestly one of the strangest anime games I've ever played. I'm having a hard time even placing it in a genre. I wanted to consider this a party game, but there is no board in between matches or greater objectives that you're working towards, and most of these modes are more fleshed out than the standard Mario Party minigame. The main minigame, Treasure Battle, is a 2v2 game of capture the flag. When playing single player, the other team member is controlled by the AI, but you're able to freely swap between the two characters on your team. And if you have a second player, you can each control one of the team's characters. Like in a fighting game, the characters have combos and special attacks, but the main goal is to grab the treasure chest in the middle of the map and bring it back to your team's base. And once in your team's base, you need to guard it until your ship arrives to pick it up. And sometimes there are multiple rounds, and whichever team scores the most rounds wins. There's also an assortment of other mini-games. Pirate Soccer is a Rocket League-esque game of soccer where each team is trying to hit the soccer ball into the other team's goal. You can make use of attacks to send the ball flying or damage your opponents and slow them down. Cross Country has you doing a series of platforming challenges as you race to the goal. If your team reaches all the checkpoints faster than the other team, you win. In Treasure Hunt, both teams roam a large map hunting for treasure chests, and each time you find a chest and grab it, you gain a point, and whichever team has the most points at the end of the game wins. Teamwork Rally has both team members taking their own treasure chest from one end of the map to the other, tossing the chest to each other over large gaps. Like with Cross Country, if your team reaches the checkpoints faster than the other team throughout the course of the match, you win. Kung Fu Survival is a contest between both teams to send more Kung Fu Jugons flying. The team that KOs the most by the end of the round wins. And lastly, Battle Royale is a 2v2 deathmatch between both teams. You and your teammate try to KO members from the other team, and whichever team has the most KOs at the end of the round wins. Unfortunately, the large variety of ways to play doesn't save the game from being painfully mediocre. The biggest issue is the combat. The hitboxes seem to be completely random, with some attacks reaching an incredibly long distance. And most of the attacks leave you in a stupidly long recovery period in which your character lays on the ground waiting for you to mash A while spinning the analog stick. Sure, you can guard against these attacks, but in most of the modes, every second you spend idling wastes precious time in actually completing the objective. All of this is especially frustrating in Treasure Battle, where holding the chest greatly decreases your speed. Your only options are to hope that your partner knocks the other team members to the ground, or to pray that you're playing with a character who has decent speed stats. You can attack while holding the treasure chest, but the enemies are chasing you from behind, and stopping to turn around and hit them just takes too long. And the most frustrating part is that when you finally get the treasure chest in your team's base, you need to make sure it doesn't get thrown out of the base, because every time it leaves your base's boundary, the ship begins to reverse its direction, meaning that when you get the chest back in, you'll need to wait even longer. You basically have to spam attacks and hope one of the enemies doesn't flank you or hit you with a special attack, and getting flung out of the map or being KO'd takes a ridiculously long time to recover from. This is all a shame because it can feel exciting trying to rush the treasure chest to your team's base, or whenever you hit the chest out of your enemy's hands and go on to steal the round. But all that fun is ruined when you're stuck recovering from every attack. Shit! Considering that most of the mini-games boil down to spamming clunky attacks in some form or another, that variety quickly becomes repetition. I even tried out some of the mini-games in co-op mode. While playing Treasure Battle with my wife, I did get some enjoyment out of coordinating a strategy, but it didn't make the clunky combat any less hard to swallow, and with the other games we tried out, there wasn't any real fun to be had either. The controls are okay, if a bit slippery at times, but I do really like this game's implementation of the camera. Using the C-stick to control the camera is something that not a lot of games in 2002 were doing. And there's also a secondary partner camera that gives you a view of your partner from a distance, which helps you determine where everyone else is on the map. I do also have to give the presentation some credit. I think the cel-shaded look on the characters fits really well, and while there aren't really any environments from the anime's many wacky locations, I do think the port towns and islands match One Piece's aesthetic pretty well. The special attacks, despite how inconsistent you as the player seem to be able to activate them, look really nice.
I wrote a blog post a while ago about why I f***ing hate video games, because this is what it does. It appeals to like the male fantasy.
The music is pretty generic, but the voice cast is as lively as ever, and there's also a pretty cool opening intro that is set to the anime's third opening. Unfortunately, content is another aspect of the game that disappoints. There are a few different modes, including a free play mode, training mode, a mode where you go through a series of rounds trying to win the most matches, and a story mode called Scenario Mode. In the story mode, the Straw Hats along with Ace and Vivi are invited by original character Rocky Hattori to participate in an event called the Treasure Battle. Straw Hats and gang break into teams of 2, and the team you select can affect your difficulty. You'll mostly do treasure battles with the occasional round of another type of minigame. The very small story is a mix of animation and still images, though each team does have a fully animated ending. Inside these treasure chests you slave away for are cards from the From TV Animation One Piece card game, and the story mode even ends with what seems like a glorified advertisement for the card game. From the main menu, you can access a gallery where you can view all the cards you've obtained, and in order to unlock the full roster of 20 characters, extra stages, modes, and costumes, you have to obtain certain sets of cards. But the cards are randomly acquired through play, and duplicates are possible. The roster is actually one of the more exciting aspects, but the system of randomized unlocks is annoying. Treasure Battle is one of the more interesting One Piece games I've played, but even with my blind devotion to any and all media or merchandise featuring my favorite franchise, it still falls short in too many aspects to be anything more than a passing curiosity. The next game released on the GameCube was One Piece Grand Battle 3. Grand Battle started as a series of 2.5D platform fighters on the PlayStation 1, but when the series made its 6th-gen debut on the GameCube and PlayStation 2 with Grand Battle 3, it became a 3D arena fighter. While not as fully featured or as polished as its sequel, Grand Battle Rush, or simply Grand Battle in the West, I find this game to still have a lot of charm. Opening with a beautiful animated sequence set to the anime's iconic We Are, Grand Battle 3 bleeds One Piece out of every orifice. The menu is chock full of references and cute scenes. Even the character select screen in the game's arcade mode has so much charm, showing you the characters hanging out in a bar together, zooming in on what each character is doing as you select them. Small details like some characters' taunts changing their appearance, or stages being filled with fully modeled and sometimes voiced background characters who act as stage hazards really go the extra mile in making this game feel more like a tribute to the source material than just a cash grab. Speaking of going the extra mile, Grand Battle 3 has a surprising amount of depth. All 16 characters have full move lists filled with quite a few combo strings, as well as unique cinematic special attacks. Even though there aren't any unique strings or combos for each character, there's a lot of variety in how they play, and I've always enjoyed the series' emphasis on vertical combat and traversing the stage. One aspect I'm glad didn't continue in later games was a third combo route initiated by holding the jump button in tandem with the normal attack button to begin launching aerial strings. While it seems like the characters have more moves, the strong attack button is left with only one possible combo, and I prefer the later games integrating the launching aerial strings into the strong attack button, allowing for 2 combo routes streamlined between the normal and strong attack buttons. But in all, the combat feels tight and solid, and aside from getting over a few button differences, I didn't find it hard to go back to this title after playing the more polished Grand Battle Rush and Grand Adventure. There's the standard assortment of arcade mode, versus mode, tournament, training, as well as the gallery mode where you can view character bios, models, concept art, cinematics, and cards from the From TV Animation One Piece card game. Yep, collecting more One Piece trading cards. Thankfully, this time the cards aren't acquired randomly, and interestingly enough, the cards you collect are digital versions of a special set the real-life card game had themed around this game itself. The arcade mode, which is centered around the Skypiea arc, features unique animated endings
人にとって死は最大の恐怖。だから地に顔をうずめ神に慈悲を請う。人は神を恐れるのではない。恐怖こそが神なのだ。
and in-engine cutscenes for some of the characters' final battles, and these are especially cool.
なんだと?
見せてあげるわ。
It's a shame that later entries didn't continue this trend. I would have loved to see these done with the graphical enhancements of Grand Battle Rush. And speaking of cutscenes, another feature not found in later entries is every level 1 super cutting away to show a unique cinematic. Later games had super attacks being performed in the middle of the fight without cutting away, but I think the cinematic attacks are more appealing. One small gripe though is that only the Straw Hats and Eneru have multiple level 1 supers, with all other characters only having one level 1 and level 2 respectively. And the level 2 supers in this game are absolutely bonkers. There are so many flashing colors on the screen, it can almost be overwhelming, but I absolutely love their energy. Each character's attack has their own unique theme, and some even include fun references. For example, in Usopp's pound attack, he stops slamming his opponent midway through to get a rubber band of doom in there. And when Sanji is using his level 2, or most of his attacks for that matter, against a woman, he'll have unique dialogue gushing over them with hearts in his eyes. Grand Battle Rush would go on to further enhance these in every aspect, with rearranged music and unique settings for every attack. This game's presentation is also extremely solid. The character models are more simple than in Grand Battle Rush, but I prefer this game's brighter color palette. The bright and bold look of the characters matches the art of the anime much better, and the stages in this game look great, and I'm especially in love with the water in the Mocktown stage. I'm also a huge fan of some of the background characters acting as stage hazards. Pissing off Bellamy only to have him bounce around the map until he targets one of the players is a cute touch, and the music, a lot of which is found in both previous and future games, is still great as always. There's a pretty fair amount of content, and the methods for unlocking things aren't nearly as frustrating as other One Piece games. Unlocking the full roster of 16 characters just requires going through the arcade mode with certain characters, sometimes on higher difficulties. There are other unlockables like 2 additional stages, costumes, as well as a super hard mode, and different announcer voices. Now, some of these are a lot more time-consuming to unlock, but all of the important unlockables aren't hidden behind unfair methods. This game's roster has some surprising inclusions. All of the Straw Hats are playable as well as Ace and Shanks, but despite being focused around the Skypiea arc, Crocodile, Bon Clay, Smoker, and Hina are playable, and even have unique cutscenes in the arcade mode. You can also play as Eneru, Ohm, and Wiper. Wiper and Hina are especially strange to have playable, as these are their only playable appearances in a One Piece console game. I really like this game a lot, and for most of the same reasons I like Grand Battle Rush and Grand Adventure. They aren't very deep and definitely don't do much to break the anime game mold, but I've always enjoyed these charming little arena fighters, and I'm proud to have Grand Battle 3 in my collection.